environment, which is going to significantly help us in the next year. And the third is, possibly there is again a talk and consensus coming up as to how the world can do far more better and collaborative manner in the next anything of this sort happens in future. So these things will positively support the business in future. I'm putting a little bit of a caveat as we see some kind of spike happening in different parts of the world again, which is a bit unfortunate, but then if hopefully that would get controlled by additional action around vaccination and some amount of precautions. And government policies are really working on helping the consumption to grow. Universal vaccination I already mentioned. I think that is going to help us stabilize. And global recovery of traded volumes is visible, and further it is going to strengthen in the next part of this year, 2021.
94% of manganese consumption goes into steel, so it's totally dominated by the steel industry. And manganese is in many ways is similar to iron ore, which was being discussed before this session, but in terms of the mining of the product. But the difference is that manganese is consumed in steel as an alloy, so it's smelted before it's consumed rather than going into the steel. It's just as an ore. Every single ton of steel uses some manganese for desulfurization. Every ton of steel has some manganese in it, and for other properties related to strength, some steel, quite a lot of steels have manganese in for this purpose as well. On average, the manganese content of steel is around 0.8%. There's a range from between 0.2 up to about 2.5 is the general range. There's minimal recycling of manganese in steel, so even if you're producing in an EAF with a lot of manganese coming in from the scrap, that most of the manganese from the scrap just goes into the slag, and you have to add it in again.
Of 2019, and then was just compounded by the virus in 2020. The second half of last year showed significant recovery. That's mostly on the back of very strong demand from China. I'll touch upon it in a later slide. And from China's ferrochrome and stainless steel sector, with South African output coming back to pre-pandemic levels as soon as Q3, and then Indian output recovering significantly in Q4 with the mine auctions ending and the mines restarting their activity. Yeah, when I'm talking about chrome ore, I'd just like to touch upon the UG2 situation a bit more closely. So for those of you that don't know, UG2 ore is a byproduct of PGM's production in South Africa, which is specific to South Africa due to the geological makeup of the country. It's cheaper to produce than conventional ore because it's a byproduct of PGM production. And it's an attractive product for Chinese consumers.
I mean, for manganese ore to be really cut back, it's got to drop by 50%. And in fact, right now, even if manganese ore prices weaken, there are more and more manganese miners coming on stream because it's still a profitable operation. And the same thing you could say with chrome ore, with UG2 and the chrome ore, and most of the countries that produce chrome ore, their cost of production is still much below the current prices, so you're not going to see a cutbacks on that. Now, on the alloys, you could say ferrochrome. Well, when you think about it realistically, South Africa, which was the largest ferrochrome producer in the world, has basically become a second-tier supplier. I mean, in the United States, the biggest supplier other than South Africa and the biggest grower is Finland, more than anyone else. I'm very much in favor. I think that the current system is outdated, completely outmoded, and as you saw, you need a futures market. Now, when you add a futures market, you start adding speculation, and that's the most important thing, because years ago, and I could say I'm probably much older than anybody else on this panel, the London Metal Exchange was basically a principles market, which was between the major suppliers and the major buyers, And as you thought, it was actually fundamentally driven. And a while back, maybe 20 years ago, the people at the London Metal Exchange decided to open it up to the financial wizards of the market. And they're the ones who provided the liquidity. So therefore, somebody in any country in the world who wanted to speculate in aluminum or lead and zinc or any other commodity could go in there. So as a result, the traded volume on the LME increased exponentially because you brought other market participants in. So anybody could speculate on any commodity that's traded on the LME. And that increased the liquidity, and it also increased it for the companies themselves. Consumers could actually hedge forward. They didn't have to buy on a continual spot basis. They didn't have to go into index pricing.
What's happening there in terms of production reductions and so on has really helped to create the price spike that we've seen. I mean, as Pat had intimated, I think in what he said, we started to see the trajectory in China start to level off now, and the prices start to come down a bit. So maybe the air's starting to come out of it a little bit now, but it's definitely been a driver in South Africa. I think South Africa has been a major reason for this for this overstocked manganese ore market. There's a lot of people, I think, expected the South African ore production last year to fall a lot more than it did, and I think there's as we've seen in chrome ore as well, there's a lot of small scale production that's starting to emerge, and I guess the question is, in South Africa, we've all seen both chrome ore and manganese ore that the production has come back quite well, but it seems like the logistics are still quite constrained, and COVID is still having quite an impact on Transnet in terms of both the electricity and moving the ore. So that's definitely an issue, I think, that's still there.
What's important to watch out for in Inner Mongolia is, speaking to what Kevin was saying, it is by far the main producing region for ferrochrome in China. They have the largest capacity in China, but they also have a lot of smaller producers, and that's what the government is really cracking down on with these measures. That's just an acceleration of a longer trend that we've seen in China, with every year environmental inspections shutting down these smaller furnaces. So what we're seeing right now in Inner Mongolia is just the kind of a speeding up of this process with new measures. So with these power restriction issues, but they're mainly targeting the same producers. It's these smaller furnaces with kind of outdated installations, more polluting installations. So that's the general trend, and I think that from what I've been hearing, that's something that's here to stay for the better part of this year, because it's not. Some of them are not coming back online, and some of these restrictions are not going to be lifted. So I think that's something that the market's going to have to deal with for most of the year this year with this Inner Mongolia situation.